Hi everybody, welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast and our wrap from the Solidarity GP Grand Prix of Barcelona, or is it Solidarity Grand Prix of Barcelona? I'm not
I think
sure.
it's just the Solidarity Grand Prix.
It's the Solidarity GP hashtag. Right, we've been working this event for 4 days now. You think, we'd actually get a handle on what the handle is, but, never mind. As people who can watch us on YouTube might possibly see, we're a man down. What's happened to David Emmett today?
Yeah, it looks like he's been hit by a bout of the dreaded lurgy. He was running on fumes since he came in this morning. He didn't quite look like himself, so he's retired off back to his hotel for an early night's kip, and I think it was much needed. So, we'll have to go a little solo here.
Yeah, unbelievably, Dave is probably going to hit the sack. For him not to be up till 2 or 3 a.m. on the day of a race is quite uncommon, Neil, so he must be feeling pretty bad. But the good news is, if you listen to this podcast, then we've got much more coming up. On Tuesday, we'll be doing a podcast wrap from the first test of 2025. And then, of course, we'll have our midweek show on Wednesday, whereupon we'll talk about a few more of the ramifications of this Grand Prix. Jorge Martin will analyse his championship. We'll talk a little bit more about Pecco Bagnaia's mistakes. But, just off the bat, what's your kind of grade for this Grand Prix? I mean, considering all the factors that it took to make this event happen.
Considering it was probably just about a fortnight ago that we understood we would be coming here. Everything was very last minute, and you have to say it was a pretty impressive logistical achievement for all involved to make this Grand Prix happen at such late notice. So I think with that in mind, I'm going to give it a 7. It was good that we had the MotoGP Championship decided on the Sunday. I think it would have been a pretty flat day if it hadn't been. And the race was very, very tense today. I just had some kind of inkling that Jorge Martin might throw it away at some point during that race, but he managed to hold on. But aside from that tension, there wasn't a brilliant race. There wasn't a great deal of interest there. And Moto3 and Moto2 were pretty good, but with the championships decided there a few rounds ago, there wasn't a great deal riding on it. So I think it was solid 7, wasn't it, to end the season. It was nothing too spectacular. It wasn't one of the most epic finales in championship history, but it went the distance, and I think the fitting rider won.
Yeah, I think a 7's pretty fair. I mean, I would possibly even give it a 7.5 just because this was a Grand Prix of context, not just for what was going on the track and the sporting side, but, what made the event happen. Let's not forget that we're here in Barcelona when we should be in Valencia. I mean, we talked about this quite significantly in previous podcasts, Neil, but, considering all things, when we arrived here at the track this morning, it was cloaked in fog. It was extremely chilly, probably the coldest it's been since we started arriving to this track on Thursday. But, the weather was pretty staggering considering it's, getting on for late November or mid-late November here in this part of the world. And, I think it turned out pretty well. And, we saw a good race, again, a fast race. The action highlight was probably the battle for 4th place. I think a 7.5 is probably pretty good. The traffic problem was a nightmare for those trying to arrive by cars. Even for myself, just riding in on a 125cc scooter, it wasn't terribly easy. But, the paddock was extremely busy as well. It was, it did have the hint of a finale. So was there any kind of moments that stood out for you from today or from yesterday, in fact?
Bear with me, dear listener or dear viewer on YouTube, for those of us that are deciding to drink us in with their eyes. But my moment was when Martin emerged from the mystery box with a strange kind of Terminator mask on, and Martinator was emblazoned all over the victory celebrations, and he strode forward with Schwarzenegger-like purpose and broke some weird glass case in a slightly bizarre and random end-of-year title-winning celebration. And
I suspect you're being a bit untruthful here now.
And when I looked up from my desk and saw the expression on your face, as you saw Martinator emblazoned all over the television, that was my moment, Ad.
He went full on. He went fully in, didn't he, for the whole Martinator theme? The helmet looked pretty cool.
They even had the Terminator music.
I know, and the leathers, which you couldn't tell from the TV, but until you got into the press conference, they're all detailed with like cyborg kind of graphics. I thought, oh man, oh boy, here we go. Yeah.
And how about you, Ad? What was your moment of the weekend?
It wasn't the post-race celebration. I actually would give full marks for creativity there. I mean, it took a lot of organisation. And it wasn't quite a mystery box when it had that strange decal on the side where it was half Jorge Martin, half robot. But goodness, I think, I mean, Moto 2 as well had some pretty spectacular crashes, into the first corner, beginning the second lap. I mean, that class, for me, Neil, I don't know if it's been the Pirelli tyres, but it's been really shaken up in 2024 in terms of, what can happen. Sergio Garcia, the poor guy, must rank as one of the biggest chokes in terms of, he didn't even finish top 3 in the championship. There's these little subplots to this Grand Prix all over if you have a good look at the results or you watched all 3 races today. But I think David Alonso's victory again, another record. And we've got a little interview. Actually, we managed to grab some words with him just after the press conference here in Barcelona. So we'll play those shortly. But I thought that was magnificent.
Yep. First rider ever in any category in 76 years to win 14 races in a season. Now, I know there weren't 14 races in a season when Agostini was riding or when Duke was riding or when Hillwood was riding or when Surtees was riding, but still 14 race wins in a single campaign, like absolutely outrageous. So, fair play to David.
Has that altered your impressive statistic in any way?
Yes, it has, yeah. Only 3 riders in this paddock have won more races than David Alonso, more Grand Prix. Let that sink in. He's 18.
And he's the second season. Wow. Okay. It's no surprise that people ask him about Moto 2 already. And he was being intelligent as always by checking everybody's expectations, saying, I need to learn a new style. I don't think people can expect much of me. It will be a learning year. All the things you would expect somebody to say. Part of you almost wants, because of how fast, how good he was, to say, I'm going to smoke him or something. Something just cheeky like that where you think, go full in on the whole next generational talent thing. But he's the real deal.
He's too intelligent for that, isn't he?
Yeah, 100%. Let's quickly talk about Pecco Bagnaia, the outgoing world champion, 2 years number 1, lost by 10 points this year. Did everything he needed to do this weekend, right? Even from Friday morning.
He did, in a way. From one side, you could say he did everything he needed to do. He needed to put Jorge Martin under excessive, relentless pressure. And he did that by being fast from the get-go on Friday. He did that by winning the sprint. And you could say he did that by leading the race from start to finish. Did he do absolutely everything? I mean, he could have resorted to a few more of the dark arts, I feel. I know he mentioned after Sepang that he wasn't going to do this. He's not that kind of rider. But I don't think you have to necessarily be a particularly dirty rider to try and slow the pace down, try and slow the field down, especially in a race like today's when the tire conservation was very much the order of the day, and we did see quite a decent drop off in lap times towards the end of the race.
But wouldn't that have been a bigger risk?
It would have been a risk because he did need to win to kind of have a chance. But I still think he looked so dominant and so impressive right the way through the weekend that even if he did play around a little bit at the start, probably had enough in hand to make sure that he could still position himself right towards the front, and no one was really going to, I think, ride away and escape from Bagnaia. So he was picture perfect. The frankly ludicrous stat that he's won 11 races. I don't know exactly how many times that has been done in the season, but it's very few, and I think only 4 riders have managed to do it ever. For him to do that and not be the champion must be particularly galling. And I thought it was quite interesting actually seeing Pecco's reaction on the slowdown lap, because obviously he was very graceful, very sporting, as we expected him to be. Classy guy and a classy champion. A sign of a classy champion that he was so sporting, and congratulated Jorge. But he was stood watching Martin celebrate in Park Fermi, and you could just see that it was really grating him. It was eating away at him inside that somehow he had let this slip through his fingers. And I think that has to be the overriding emotion for Bagnaia at the end of play, that this one is one that got away from him, because he was the fastest guy. He was the guy with the most explosive speed all year long. And he's not going to be wearing the number 1 on his bike next year.
It's a strange situation where he's been perfect all weekend. Pole position, sprint victory, Grand Prix victory today, led pretty much every lap. And you think, that's maybe the perfect outgoing statement where you think, okay, I've won a lot this year, but my mistakes have prevented me from being world champion. But then, like you say, the other swing of it is that he's in Parc Ferme thinking, I've just obliterated everybody here. How am I not champion again? I mean, it must be a weird kind of mental state for him but maybe it's something that he arrested and dealt with already 2 to 3 GPs ago. Certainly when he crashed out of the sprint in Malaysia, which he's already cited as the biggest mystery or the biggest clanger of 2024.
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge moment. And realistically, that was, there was no coming back from that. But I think it might do Pecco a bit of good in terms of his popularity, in terms of his profile, just to show that bit of emotion that he's not just going to stand and smile and wave to the camera. That he's a proper victor, a proper champion, and that one really did hurt. And he did try and, I said that he maybe could have resorted to 1 or 2 dark arts in the race, but he was trying his best to play with Martin on the grid. I mean, he made a very late decision to switch tyres right on the grid, and Martin did say that he saw that and he thought, oh God. And I think there was a chance where basically all three, there was basically like 3 front tyre options which were pretty open, and Martin was sat there thinking, okay, I don't really know what to do, because some were going to the soft, some were going to the hard, and yeah, it was he was just like, okay, well, I'll probably just go with what I'm on. In the end, it worked out pretty well for him, but Bagnaia was trying those little mind games on the grid perhaps as well, and you have to say he also tried to get as many people as possible between himself and Martin in qualifying by giving Marquez a tow, which was pretty clever. So he maybe didn't do everything he could in the race, but otherwise there was, he gave it a good go, and he was absolutely flawless this weekend.
It was a curious Grand Prix for tyres. I think Espargaro was baffled and also just full of admiration from the way that Ducati boys could run the soft rear and make it last in a competitive state all the way to the end. There was actually a phase in the race when Martin running the medium rear, I thought we would get faster and faster and maybe close down both Marquez and Bagnaia, but it just didn't happen. So, like we've said a few times on the podcast already this year, full props and praise to the Ducati engineers and the electronics guys just for getting the best out of that Michelin rear. That has been the big key point for this season. Yeah,
for 2024, absolutely. It's been the story of 2024. What was your impression of Martin this weekend? Did he? I mean, he did what he had to do to win the championship. Could he have done more?
No, and also it was quite revealing in the championship press conference where he said that in January he was very anxious. He was stressing already about the season ahead. Started working with a mental coach, and then just took more energy from hoping to win rather than stressing about not winning. And I think that's been very clear from the outset. Okay, there have been those glaring errors that we've seen, like at Sachsenring, most notably perhaps. And, the Mazzano misjudgment or miscall was something that I think could happen to any rider, not necessarily just, Jorge Martinism. But, I thought he was great, and the team's protocol, we have to give them credit as well, of like trying to treat the Grand Prix as a normal race experience in terms of setting his routine up was the right one to do. Okay, he'd been saying yesterday he hasn't been eating, and he's been obviously trying to deal with all the pressure that's around him, but I thought, he was great. And the results of the weekend just like symbolised a little bit, his season overall. I think you actually asked Joan Mir this question because, Bagnaia's won 11 races, and it's just strange how you can get these seasons where people win it.
3.
Yeah, and Mir won 1. You just get these kind of seasons where they, a title is earned in different ways. And, I thought he just did what he needed to do.
Yeah. I think there were, coming into this weekend, there were plenty of potential banana skins for Jorge. Late call to come to the circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya. Coolest temperatures of the year. 7 tyres in the allocation, the biggest tyre allocation that we've had this year.
Yep.
All things that could potentially cause you to lose your head, to lose focus, to get a little bit flustered. And I think there's definitely no doubt that there were times through the weekend when Martin did look pretty nervous and pretty angsty. Understandably. I think it was on Friday afternoon where he basically came in to change one of his tyres and had to get off his bike to go and try and grab his crew chief Daniele Romagnoli to come and stand next to him, because that's what they normally do. And Romagnoli wasn't fitting that normal plan, and he looked really anxious and kind of upset. But you have to think, like, if he didn't win the championship here, it would have been the biggest choke possibly in history. And yeah, to have that weighing on your shoulders really would have been quite a big thing to overcome. But overcome it he did. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't the perfect weekend, but I think today he sort of managed the situation pretty perfectly. Like, what was the point going up there trying to fight with Pecco and with Marc, fighting for first and second?
He admitted that.
Yeah, when he could have been ninth and still champion. So he had the completely right idea, which was to basically tuck in behind those guys and try and let them drag him away. And yeah, as you said, a couple of interesting comments in the press conference afterwards, where I know it sounds a bit cheesy perhaps, but yeah, don't be so focused on what's ahead. Try and live very much in the moment and enjoy the here and now. And I think it was a couple of races ago where he gave like some perspective on things. He said, I was fighting for the championship last year, I lost it, and look, I'm still here, and I'm fighting for the championship this year. So even if it goes wrong, there'll still be other chances in the future, maybe not next year, going to Aprilia. But, he definitely grew up a lot, I felt, this year, and became a lot more mature as a person and a rider as well. Yeah, you mentioned those mistakes, but another thing that really stands out to me, Ad, is just every time he made a mistake this year, he came back stronger. He came back immediately with a response. Crashed out in Jerez, did the double in France next time out, crashed out in Sachsenring, came back with a run of second places, which was uber consistent, while Bagnaia was having a couple of wins and a couple of non-scores, crashed in the sprint in Mandalika, then won the race on Sunday. So he had this ability to come back from really big crushing disappointments in a very professional way, which ultimately was enough, I think, to get him over the line.
When I interviewed him in Silverstone, he said one of his biggest attributes is just being able to refocus, like those times when you lose focus and you some riders struggle to get it back, to the detriment of their performance. He said he's able to just zone straight back into what he needs to do. And I think, we've seen that, like you've just highlighted several examples there. So, yeah, fair play to Jorge Martin. Just before we move on, Neil, a quick word. We're backed by Fly Racing, of course, KTM.com and Rental. If you've got a road bike and you need some accessories for your road bike, then head to rental.com because there's plenty of choice there. You have a point to make.
I do have a point to make. I mean, we were sort of saying how this is the first satellite victory in a championship in the MotoGP era. It is in the four-stroke era. But worth pointing out that I think officially Rossi's 2001 triumph is classified as a satellite team triumph. It wasn't in the official factory team.
Is that because you brought the point up in a podcast recently and you feel like it has to be justified or solidified?
Yeah, but the other times in memory that stand out are what Franco Incini and Marco Lucanelli in 82 and 81, and Kenny Roberts in 78, because that wasn't the official Yamaha team that particular year, the first championship year, Roberts. So we're talking about, what, 4 times in 50 years? This is a fairly rare achievement. And yes, the Pramac team has full factory backing.
Like Rossi did.
Yeah, has full factory machine with a factory rider contracted to the factory. However, it's still pretty remarkable that this happened. And as Jorge said, whenever he signed for Aprilia, everyone, us included, I'm pretty sure I was thinking this, that Ducati would go out of their way to make sure that he didn't win the championship. And that wasn't the case. Ducati stood back and said, "This is fair racing, and we're going to let Jorge and Pecco go for it."
Did you think it was quite weird seeing them celebrating in the garage afterwards? Of course, it's a Ducati World Championship, but it just seemed odd. Considering that, as I went into the paddock about an hour ago, the Pramac hospitality is already removing any sign of Ducati whatsoever because, they change MO, in a matter of hours, and it just. I find it a very strange sporting situation that, this can be happening. It's talk about living in the moment.
That Pramac were celebrating, you
with
mean?
the Ducati bosses that were celebrating with a team that essentially is, won a championship with a rider that's departing, and the team are departing as well.
But you've got to take your successes when you get them, and this has been a ludicrous season for Ducati in terms of domination. They're most dominant yet. They've made everyone else look silly, and I don't think you're going to pick over details. I think Davide Tardozzi said in Sepang, when you look in the record books, it's going to say Ducati next to Jorge Martin's championship name. Yeah,
true. Now, what do you reckon of Marquez? Because he never looked like all weekend he could be P2. It was a great start, of course. Was he shadow boxing a little bit? And do you think he actually gave everything he had to chase Pecco Bagnaia, or there was then maybe a little bit more? If we were in round 6, you'd have to imagine a Marquez special would like he did in Dramir and warm up, for heaven's sake.
I don't think so. No, I think this was Marc giving it absolutely everything. I think there were times where it looked as though he was sort of sussing out the situation, the championship situation, and there was part of me that was thinking maybe he's sitting behind Pecco, being smart, because he's going to be a factory Ducati rider next year. This is going to get him in the good books of that entire team. Maybe once he sees that Martin is going to still be in third, then he can point on Pecco at the end. But I think it was Simon Criffo that said on the live feed that he was just losing so much time coming out of that final turn. You could see on the top speed charts that he was down on the GP24s. I think he was losing a considerable amount of time on the front straight here, and he was having to do so much work through the in section that that was pretty much all he could do.
Well, Alex Marquez said that he felt there was not that much difference between the GP23s and 24s here. Maybe just down to some of the circumstances you mentioned earlier with the temperatures and the tyres and whatever else. But obviously there was still something.
Yeah, and it was a fabulous turnaround for Marc. As you said, no one really saw that coming. He was giving it the whole, this is one of my worst circuits. I implore you to go back and look at Marc's record at this circuit from his days in the 125 class. I mean, it's the amount of podiums he's got. Okay, he might not have won races outright here, but the amount of podiums he's had is frankly quite ludicrous at his home track. And yeah, he was giving it the whole, I don't really care about third in the championship on Thursday, but I mean, I think you could see from his performance today that he did. And he always finds ways to motivate himself, doesn't he? He always finds ways to try and get the best out of himself. And it was a tremendous race. He did the right thing, got the great start and just tucked in behind Bagnaia, used him as reference up ahead. But again, I think it's another sign that it does take him a little bit of time to get going. Okay, he's been here before with the Ducati, but we're in pretty different conditions, different temperatures. And like we've seen several occasions, maybe a crap Friday and gets better gradually, and we see the best of him on Sunday. So it was another excellent performance. To be that close to Bagnaia, I think, on a GP23 was it took some going, or took some doing.
Yeah, the light blue is going to be turning red, of course, on Tuesday. And if we remove the name Pedro Acosta, then, of course, the heir apparent to Marc Marquez is David Alonso. He'll be remaining in light blue for 2025 when he moves up to Moto2. As we mentioned earlier, we managed to grab some words with him after that record-breaking or record-setting feat today in Moto3, and here is what he had to say. David, congratulations. The last time we spoke on the podcast, I think, was Assen. So it was a long time ago. You were on the way to winning the World Championship, and now you said in the press conference you were tired of people talking about records, but, it's been incredible what you've done. So what kind of are the emotions right now?
Yeah, I remember Assen, that was a difficult weekend. After all of these races, now I have a mix of emotions. I'm really, really happy, but at the same time, yes, sad, no? Because this dream, finally tomorrow we will wake up of this amazing dream, and 2024 comes to an end. We have a lot of fun during the races, during the travels, with the team, and part of all the pressure that I was dealing with it all the year. We have a lot of fun, and I think we enjoy each moment, the present moment, that this is the most important.
David, it must have been a crazy few weeks for you, from Japan and being away with the team, like you say, all the flyaways, then coming home, celebrations, the problems in Valencia as well. I imagine the last 2 months have been quite hard to get your head around, the highs and the lows, the happiness, and also some of the difficulties.
Yeah, these last 2 races were special for Valencia, on Malaysia, with the situation with the team that is more than half of the team from Valencia. It was not easy, and then this GP, we are happy to race here because it was the Solidarity GP, and we know that all the money we will send to Valencia. So we had a nice reason, these 2 races, for give our maximum on track.
Thinking about Moto2, that's the next chapter. What's going to be the biggest preparation necessary for you? Is it going to be a physical thing, maybe a mental thing for the change of style or the technology? What's kind of going on in your mind at the moment?
Yeah, now I will try to enjoy as much as I can this last victory, not thinking on Moto2, and then in few days I will start to think on changing my riding style, on be a bit more stronger, and on adapt to this new bike that have a lot of difference. So it will be a hard way for sure, but if we take it easy, we can go step by step.
Lastly, David, you're in the record books as world champion, but you're also in the record books for the amount of victories. Is that something that, you don't realise now, but maybe when you're as old as Vicente and I, then maybe you can look back and think, that was something special?
Yeah, for sure. We will always remember, like 10 years later, we will remember 2024, all that we have done, and I don't know what the future will be, but till the present moment, till this day, we are so proud of what we have done, and also we cannot stop here because there is so many a long way ahead. But yeah, we will remember.
Thanks, David. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Neil, we were saying what a cute, cool guy when we interviewed him in Assen earlier this year, and Alonso's just made good on it. But we'll talk about him maybe in another podcast, because I'd like to ask you a little bit about Aleix Espargaro, that great fight he had with Alex Marquez, as we mentioned, probably the action highlight of the Grand Prix, and Bastianini, who made a couple of mistakes and just doesn't seem to gel particularly well in terms of karmic feeling with the circuit, the Barcelona, Catalunya.
Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, this was the place back in May where he took umbrage with the race controls, or the FIM stewards' decision to give him a long lap penalty, and basically just completely ignored it. And yeah, once again he was left frustrated. It's been strange for Bastianini because historically he's been kind of crap in the sprints and then very strong in the longer races and pretty strong towards the end. And in the last couple of weeks it's been the opposite, actually. He's had a couple of really great sprint races, and just hasn't quite been able to replicate that on Sunday. I think if today went differently, he probably could have been up there fighting, certainly ahead of Martin. And there was a little semblance of tension at the start of the race, because Martin was ahead of a big freight train of riders, which included Bastianini, who was like snapping at his heels, that went all the way back to 10th. So feasibly, if Martin didn't have his house in order, he could have been outside that top 9, which was so necessary for him to clinch the title. But Bastianini got caught up with Aleix Espargaro. Aleix Espargaro was very, very intent on riding, I think, defensively. Shotgun for his good buddy and his protege, and ultimately, I think Aleix pulled out one of his best performances of the entire season. And
he said as well he was on the limit. It wasn't a case of like he saw Martin and thought, right, I'm backing off now. Yeah,
he was absolutely balls to the wall, I think, for the most part. And Bastianini took umbrage with this and said didn't think it was the right thing to do, and found it strange that even in Aleix's last race he was essentially riding for someone else. But Aleix's retort was absolutely expert. I don't know if you heard it, but he said, I looked around over my shoulder in the final couple of laps waiting to see where he was, and he was 3 seconds behind me. So if it was that bad, or if I was riding that slowly, then surely he could have caught up with me on a factory Ducati. So it was another one of those weird races where Bastianini just didn't get the best out of his package. And you have to say, boys out of his time with the factory Ducati team with that feeling of what if he didn't become the rider that we all thought he would at the end of 2022.
But I think still, 9 podiums this year? I mean,
yeah, still like a super year. Well, I say super. Still a good year and a good recovery from last year, but at the end of 2022, it was like, who's the better rider, Martin or Bastianini? Bastianini got the factory seat. We thought, right decision. We saw this year who the better rider was.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on Aleix, great ride, absolutely sensational ride, and the only person to be able to get up and among the Ducatis. And he lost out to Alex Marquez right at the end, but Alex Marquez was saying that the Aprilia was so good in that final sector that it really catapulted him onto the front straight. And Aleix was so late in the brakes. He was doing a fantastic defensive action. So for him to hold out in Alex, I think for so long was a good
props
good
to Alex as well. He's been riding well of late. Yeah. I mean, he's really got his head around the GP23, and now he's got to head downstairs to change bikes on Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, good performance as well from him. It was very close sometimes to Aleix, and I thought he even highlighted how difficult it is to pass here sometimes. You know, you got the prime spots into turn 1 and then a turn 10, but other than that, I mean, they pretty look very, very wide, I thought, for the second part of the race. So decent stuff. Elsewhere, Pedro Acosta had brake trouble. It meant that in the battle for... Actually, I'm also very curious as to, you know, Bagnaia Bastianini is now 4th in the world for this year. I wonder how much he missed out on in cash, you know, with top 3. I'm willing to bet it's a very nice new car. It's got to be up that kind of level.
Got to be 6 digits at least.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of change. No wonder he was pissed off. But then Brad Binder managed to leapfrog. He was the first non-Ducati rider in the World Championship standings on the KTM by leapfrogging Pedro Acosta, who had brake trouble. Acosta, I couldn't tell if he was livid or resigned or just, you know, it's just an indication really of his rather bizarre personality, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I didn't catch Pedro because he was speaking when I think someone else was on. I can't remember who exactly, but yeah, it was a disappointing end really to the season for Acosta. It didn't quite pan out as we imagined it would after the first couple of races. But Binder, I mean, special shout out for him coming through from 18th to 6th.
Wow.
I mean, that was a great recovery ride, and he was miles away on Friday. Pretty hopeless on Saturday, and yeah, fair play to Brad. He put in a really solid showing. One of his best showings, I think, of the second part of the year, maybe the entire year.
So yeah, good performance. Is there anybody else, Neil, that kind of stood out?
Well, I don't know. It's coming on to this advanced stage of the show. Is it maybe time for our winners and losers?
Yeah, absolutely. But then, you know, who do you pick for a winner? I mean, there's a couple of contenders and most obvious ones. Is there anybody maybe slightly left field that you want to pick?
Left field, I mean, there's plenty of left field ones, but I mean, there are fairly obvious names that spring to mind just for what they did. But I'm going to go with Aleix Espargaro because I think that his year was kind of in danger of petering out. He had a really rubbish flyaway stage of the season and wasn't really anywhere to be seen. But yeah, just managed to pull it all together for this weekend. Probably could have been on the podium in the sprint race had he not got such a disastrous start. And yeah, I think that was an example of him absolutely maximising what he could get out of that package today. So, and he saw his best mate, or one of his best mates, win the World Championship. And I think Jorge said to him when they pulled over at the end of the start-finish straight in the victory lap that, you know, this one's for you, mate, as well. So you know, there's maybe part of him that thinks that he won that championship, even though I think that's probably a bit overblown and exaggerated. But yeah, I think Aleix, fair play, good send-off. And he said at the end of his debrief, he feels relief. There's been so much tension. There is so much tension being a World Championship level rider. That yeah, when that pressure is lifted and you no longer are thinking about the next race, you have that feeling of relief. So I think he knows that it's the correct time to buy out.
Yeah, enjoy the moment, mate, because you're on a Honda now. You know, I think my winner, I'm going to say Pramac, because I think they were the right place, the right time, with the right rider. They also had the right staff, and it all just came. It was just like one of those perfect chemistry things that tends to happen in sport. Big change now coming up, of course, taking on the Yamahas. They're probably going to be financially rewarded for, you know, that kind of switch. Of course, they're losing their world champion, but they're getting two very capable riders to sort of move into that next phase of the team's existence, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, Pramac, I think they'll be having the loudest and biggest party here in Barcelona this evening. So that's my winner. Loser?
Tempted to say Joan Mir, because it was another Sunday that ended in the gravel trap. How many
crashes has he got? Did you look it up yet or not?
Yeah.
It's got to be over 20.
Got to be, yeah.
We'll try and find it for the next show. Actually, let's have a little competition, people. If you're listening, especially patrons, guess how many crashes Joan Mir has had without looking it up, and we'll see who gets closest. Maybe we can give away some sort of Paddock Pass podcast mug or something to somebody who can get the right total, because it's...
signed by Joan Mir.
Yeah. Before he breaks it. Yeah, Joan Mir then.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say. The part of me thought, fair play mate, in his debrief when he was saying that it makes no difference if he finishes 11th or if he ends in the gravel trap. in terms of emotion, he doesn't really get anything from finishing 11th. He wants to push as hard as he can. And he did qualify well. He was 11th in qualifying. He was running fairly well before he crashed out, but I mean, we're talking about 3 seasons now where he's just had an absolute nightmare. And a colleague made the comparison, Rennie Skaesbrook. I was speaking with him earlier, who works for Cycle News. Yeah, top man is Rennie. And he said he kind of reminds him of Kenny Roberts Jr., who, obviously had that success in 2000. And then, obviously, uncompetitive Suzuki's in the kind of subsequent years, and he could really pull a performance out of the hat when the conditions were right, but when they weren't, he was fairly anonymous. And Joan does have that. You can't ever imagine Joan really being back at the front of MotoGP, can you?
Yeah, I don't know. The Honda still could have something. That's a story that's ongoing, and it's just a matter of time. He's got 2 more years with it, so let's see where it goes. My loser, I'm going to say, I'm tempted to give it to Maverick Vinales, because wasn't there a statistic, Neil, on Saturday where he's the only rider apart from maybe Martin or Bagnaia, I can't remember who the other names were, to make Q2 in every single Grand Prix, going back even to last year.
And the only non-Ducati rider to have won a race this year.
Yeah, and then to sort of, again, have another miserable start and again I think he was outside the top 14 at one point. It was...
Yeah, he was over the curbs at turn 1 on the first lap, and he was way back. Yeah,
just there. A rider of that ability to not be able to put it together. And he said in his debrief that the second half of the year, for 2 years in a row, the Aprilia team or the bike or something about it, they just seem to struggle. So I file him in one of those categories as a rider that's keen to jump off the bike he's got. Even though the one he might be getting on might be even worse for him.
Yeah. Although he did acknowledge that even he acknowledged that he's something of a random number generator. So a triumph for us at the Paddock Pass podcast.
Day by day with Maverick.
Exactly.
But I also want to give a notable mention to poor Colin Vaya, because, going into the race, tied on points for P2 in the championship, and then I think finishing 10th, 11th over the line, being promoted to 10th. And then Daniel Holgado, who had a fantastic race to finish right behind David Alonso. Colin just wasn't really at the races, and I think he was speaking a little bit about the gearing that they selected for the Husqvarna not being the right setting. Something that can happen, of course. Still relatively new to the Grand Prix race in the end of his second season, but that was a missed chance as well.
Yeah, and he didn't even have his compatriot watching on, because Dave Emmett was I don't even
maybe
think
it was it. Sympathy
he was in the
pain.
media centre.
Sympathy
whenever
pains.
that was going on. Yeah, Dave was walking around trying to G up himself for the rest of the day. Poor guy.
That's pretty much it. Cheers, Neil. Thanks for sitting down to talk. Thank you very much for listening or watching. We'll be back with a podcast again, as we mentioned, on Tuesday after the first test of 2025. And then, of course, our midweek show where we'll be going through some questions from our patrons. If you are a patron and you're listening, don't forget to send us your comments, especially on the new world champion. What do you think of him? What do you think of his season? Will he be wearing that number 1 on Aprilia next year? And will he be able to repeat it? Go back to back. Riders who have won championships of different manufacturers, just Eddie Lawson.
I think only 2 riders have done that in the past. Lawson and Rossi. So yeah, Martin will be gunning for gunning to become the 3rd person to win back-to-back titles with different manufacturers. He's not going to. I think I can tell you that as a certainty right now. But let's go along with that pretense for the rest of the preseason.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye bye.